Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If you're contemplating whether you will ever be able to afford a foreign holiday again, or even for the first time, then this may not be good for your blood pressure. This is the island of Skopelos in the Aegean, where we think the businessman Sir Philip Green, is sunning himself on his newest yacht, Lionheart. He has 3. So what, you may say, fair enough, that's capitalism. Except that today MPs issued a devastating report saying that it was anything but fair enough. He was the unacceptable face of capitalism, they said. One even compared him to the newspaper baron Robert Maxwell, who stole money from the Daily Mirror pension fund and then disappeared off the back of his own yacht just off the Canary Islands. But tonight, Sir Philip wasn't having any of it. The comments were outrageous, he said, and they must be withdrawn.
Philip Green's success as a businessman made him a billionaire. He moves in the same circles as presidents and prime ministers, superstars and supermodels. He was knighted for services to retail, but today 2 committees of MPs judged that when Sir Philip offloaded BHS, the business was left on life support and that he represents the unacceptable face of capitalism. The 2 committee chairs told me Sir Philip is ultimately responsible for the company's failure.
He bought the company in 2000. He extracted enormous amounts of wealth for his family. He didn't invest sufficiently in the business and didn't contribute enough to the pension scheme. And then when it was heading for the cliff, he sold it to somebody who was incompetent.
Sir Philip Green, the unacceptable face of capitalism, isn't that a bit strong?
It's unacceptable in the first instance that he plundered the firm. It's unacceptable that he ran the firm onto the rocks.
Comments today, you actually said that Sir Philip Green was worse than Robert Maxwell.
Yes, indeed.
Do you stand by that?
Absolutely.
Explain why.
We're now in a position where somebody has plundered a company, taken fortune beyond the dreams of avarice out of that company, and left the pension scheme in a worse state than any of the Maxwell pension schemes were left in.
Those comments have triggered a furious response. Tonight in a letter, Sir Philip says the comparison with Maxwell is highly defamatory and completely false. He said the MP's investigation was biased and unfair, and added he is sad and sorry for all the BHS people caught up in this horrid story. But he insists he is not to blame. BHS went bust in April. 20 stores like this one in Rotherham have since closed. The remaining 143 will shut their doors within 4 weeks. In the 14 years that Sir Philip owned BHS, it went from a profitable company to one that was heavily loss-making. The company's pension schemes went from surplus to unsustainable deficit. MPs conclude that the £300 million Sir Philip took out of the business in the good times ultimately weakened it. Sir Philip recently took possession of a 3rd luxury yacht. Meanwhile, 11,000 BHS staff are set to lose their jobs, and 22,000 members of the company's pension schemes face the prospect of less generous benefits unless the deficit is plugged. Among them is Lynn Macmillan.
I think what can be done now is that Philip Green puts his hands in his very deep pockets, brings out his chequebook and writes a cheque to pay off the deficit for the BHS pension fund. And if that means him selling a couple of his yachts, so be it, because you can only be on one yacht at once.
By the time Dominic Chappell bought BHS for £1 last year, MPs believe the failure of the business was inevitable, but he too is censured. Their report concludes he was out of his depth and over-optimistic to the point of arrogance. BHS's 88 years on the high street is coming to an end, but the fallout from its failure has some way to run.
Well, there may not be an obvious link between the collapse of BHS and Britain voting for Brexit, but in the seemingly endless search for explanations of that referendum result, much has been made of the powerful and the rich acting solely in their own interest and ignoring the greater good. So the criticism of Sir Philip Green, its former boss, by MPs is perhaps of the moment. But is it fair? Well, our business editor Joel Hills is here. Joel, maybe we can just begin with, He wants an apology. Sir Philip Green from Frank Field, is he going to get one?
No, he's not, absolutely. No surprise in a sense. The two men have clashed before, but Frank Field is absolutely crystal clear this evening. He doesn't regret what he said. He said the context has been misconstrued. And therefore, Sir Philip Green says he won't.
Yes, let's get that right.
Yes, exactly.
But just moving on, the kernel of this seems to be he bought the company for 200 million, or his wife did. It was making a profit. Its pension fund was in surplus, and then they took out more money than they were making in profits in the years afterwards. To the layman's eye, that doesn't look quite right. How normal or not normal do you think that is?
Well, look, I've spoken to directors who were sitting and working with the company when the dividends were paid, and they are clear that Sir Philip Green was taking this money out at a time when the business seemed to be going great guns. They did not have an issue with it. Now, MPs take the view that that was fine, but the problem was when things started to turn, money wasn't invested in the business, there was chronic underinvestment, and Sir Philip ignored repeated calls from the trustees to top up or increase payments to the pension scheme. I mean, you heard Frank Field in the interview being very, very clear. Look, Sir Philip Green was knighted for services to retail. This report sits very ill with that title. Field says he should only keep his gong if he writes that cheque that closes the gap in the pension scheme.
I guess that's the sum of it then, isn't it? How, in your estimation, how much is Philip Green actually worth, and what would it take, in your view, to restore what's left of his reputation?
Well, Sir Philip Green makes the Sunday Times rich list. They estimate his wealth at just over £3 billion. Now, the interesting thing is that the cost of plugging the hole in the pension fund is estimated by Frank Field MP at being £700 million. Now, Sir Philip Green has said he will fix this problem. He did say that 6 weeks ago. He hasn't yet said how he'll do it or how generous he's prepared to be. But in a sense, what MPs are asking is that he give away or give back a very significant part of his fortune. It's inconceivable that he will give that much, I would suggest. But there is he's clearly stung by the criticism here. I think you can expect a response of sorts.
Joel, thank you very much indeed.
I've been getting away with